Guess what, guys? We've got our sales in the mail today. 3 awesome boxes. We have our storm jib, small box. We have our head sail, and we have our mainsail. So hopefully we'll be doing this before all the bugs come out.
For quite a while now, we've been considering replacing our sails. Back in the Rio Dulce, we had 2 reef points put in our main, and while we were there, he did a couple of other repairs and replaced some of the stitching, because in our main, the actual stitching started to come out, which is usually the first sign that the sail needs to be replaced. And our head sail was, well, it was just too big. It was technically a 135, which is quite large anyway. And in the Caribbean or downwind, that's fine. But where we're planning to sail, we're gonna have some stronger winds, and having that large of a head sail just wasn't practical. When the wind was light enough to use the whole thing, the sail was almost too heavy and it would just kind of sag. And when the wind was strong enough to fill the whole thing, it was almost too large and we needed to start rolling it up. And once you start rolling it up, we lost sail shape pretty quickly and the luff would start to flog. We've also had to do a couple of repairs on our head sail. The luff tape started to come off. We've restitched the sun cover on, and on the sail up from the Bahamas, we actually had some of the stitching on the Sunbrella come off again. The other reason that it's probably better to replace it rather than repair it is because it's just too tall. It's stretched out over its life and it's pretty much maxed out. We can't actually apply the proper halyard tension to it. The car kind of gets stuck at the top and we can't unfurl it anymore. So we actually run the head sail a little bit loose, and that seems to sort of temporarily fix the problem. And none of these issues on their own would be a real reason to replace the sails, but since we're about to cross the Atlantic, and since our sails are our primary means of propulsion, we can't afford to lose one or have one blow out mid-passage. So all of these little individual signs telling us we need new sails all started to add up, and so we went ahead and got a new set of sails.
The first step about getting new sails is, of course, finding the right sail loft to work with. There are a few great lofts out there, but normally you would have to be in their area so that one of their technicians can come to your boat and take the measurement. But the problem, and many long-term cruisers have a similar issue, is that we are often in a remote place and need to have our sails done while we're still sailing, which is one of the reasons why we decided to go with Precision Sails, so that we can take our own measurements of our boat and get the whole process started, so that by the time we make it back to the US, the sails will be ready for us to use. We worked with them last year for the Haiti Sailing Cup, and they produced some of the sails for the regatta, and they did such an amazing job. They were easy to get a hold of, and they answered all of our questions and paid attention to a lot of details. So that made this decision to work with them for our own boat just that much easier. The entire process started several weeks ago, back when we were in the Bahamas, and we had multiple Skype calls with the design team. They answered a bunch of our questions, and they emailed us the PDF form of the instructions for the measurements we need to take. So for that, we're going to take a little trip back in time.
Well, today we're finally going to measure our boat and rig for a new set of sails. Something we've actually procrastinated doing for a little while because we thought it was going to be kind of tricky since professionals usually do it. But Precision has some pretty easy to follow directions and a downloadable PDF, which means we can measure our own boat and our own rig and get the process started while we're still here in the Bahamas. Since there's no wind today and it's pretty sunny, it's a perfect day to get this done. First thing we're gonna do is drop our head sail. Technically, you can do this with the head sail still up, but since we know that there's a nice flat spot on shore that we can lay the whole sail out, it seems a little bit easier to drop it and take it to shore to do the measurements than it is to go up the mast and measure from the top of the masthead. So that's what we're gonna do first. We're gonna head outside and drop the head sail and take it to shore. One thing we need to measure our sails we don't actually have, and that's a big 100-foot long tape measure on a big spool. We've asked around in the islands we've been to, and none of the hardware stores seem to have one. So the next best thing is about 60 feet of Dyneema, and we're just gonna measure and mark every meter so that when we measure, we can hoist this and use this as sort of our measuring tape. We can measure up to the closest meter and then take the actual tape measure and measure the exact distance of the last bit of measurement. And hopefully that's gonna be accurate enough. Well, we just took the measurements for the head sail on land, but since the mainsail sits on the boom, it's going to be much easier to just measure it on the boat. And since there's still no wind, we decided to go ahead and hoist it and get all the measurements we needed.
Nice.
But measuring our existing sails isn't the only measurements we needed. We also had to include quite a few measurements of the boat itself, like the forestay height, the hull height at certain points from the water line, the genoa track, how much adjustments we have in that, along with some more detailed measurements like slug size for our mainsail and the luff diameter for the head sail, which we used calipers, but if you don't have calipers, you can always just use a drill bit, something that gets you close so they can tell what size luff tape you need. The instructions are pretty clear, and the list is very thorough, which makes sense because it's what the designers are going to use to make sure that our new sails fit our boat perfectly.
So each sail has its own set of instructions, and the process for all of them is pretty similar. All you have to do is follow the instructions, take the measurements, and fill in the blanks. Also, snapping a few pictures of any details definitely helps too. A little trick that we found was to use our drone to take pictures of the sail when it's up and the masthead and a good picture of the boat from its side. If you don't have a drone, find a friend that has one. Or you can also take a somewhat similar picture from a dock or from your dinghy. And after that, that is it. We just sent our measurements to Precisions and they're going to start designing our sail. They said it would take about 6 to 8 weeks for the sails to be made, so that's perfect. That'll give us plenty of time before we need to leave the Bahamas. By the way, guys, check out that super cool Umaraj guard that I have. Not only they are for sale on our website, we also have his and her sets. So I'll put the link right here so you and your boo can be shamelessly matching with Uma swags.
Today our new sails are getting delivered in the mail, so we can finally take the old ones down and get ready to install the new ones. You ready?
Yes, I'm so excited.
You look cold.
Yes, it is cold.
All right, let's rock and roll. There are so many no-see-ums out here, it's insane.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, this is how covered I have to be.
It's gonna be so pretty. So this sail is smaller than our old head sail. Our old head sail was just too big. We almost always had it rolled up to keep our boat balanced. If it was all the way out in like less than 10 knots of wind, it was fine. But as soon as the wind picked up, we'd have to roll it up because it was just too much sail area. So this one is a little bit smaller, and it's also going to match the rest of the canvas work that we're doing. Well, it started to rain, so we had to come inside, but we got the head sail up and it fits perfectly. It's a few inches shorter at the top so that we can put the proper halyard tension on it, and it has a little bit of room to stretch over time. And we also took a few inches off the bottom and put a pennant down there so that the foot of the sail will be above the lifelines. The whole sail is cut down to about a 115, I believe, so it's much smaller than our old head sail. And we'll be able to have it all the way out until maybe 20-25 knots of wind, which is good, and start rolling it up after that. The clew is also cut a lot higher, so when we're tacking in and out of an anchorage, we can see underneath it and not have to roll it up like we did before. So overall, I think we're going to have the head sail out fully a lot more often. But if we do have to roll it up, it also has a triple foam luff, which means when we start rolling it up, it will retain its sail shape a lot better. And we can roll it up quite small, and we should still have really, really good sail shape. One other thing that we had them add was another set of tailtails as well. We actually sail with our tailtails quite often, which are the little green and red strings on the head sail. They just help us fine tune the trim a little bit better to get a little more speed out of our sails. But the problem was with our old sail, once we rolled it up a tiny little bit, the tailtails rolled up with it and we couldn't use them anymore. So we had them put a whole nother set at our first reef point, so when we roll up the head sail, we can still have our tailtails out. So we're pretty excited about that. Good morning, guys. This morning we're going to be putting up our new mainsail. We just opened up the bag and it's super crispy and looks very, very well reinforced. Our new sail is designed pretty similarly to our old one. It has 4 battens. The top 2 are full battens and the lower 2 are partial battens. So we should still get really good sail shape even when the 3rd reef is put in. The battens are held in a little bit differently on this new sail, which I think is a good thing because we don't need a special tool to put them in and out anymore. Which means when we drop the sail or have to take it off, we're not gonna have to search the boat to find that special batten pocket tool that we used to use on our old mainsail. Well, the no-see-ums out there are insane, but we did get the new mainsail up, and just like the Jenny, it looks really, really good. It fits perfectly. There's a little bit of room at the top, there's a little bit of room at the back. The foot doesn't touch the boom at all. Everything fits really, really well. It's super crispy. We're gonna have to get used to having a very new sail. We've never had one before, so flaking it back down on the boom is going to be tricky the first few times until everything gets broken in. We had them install 3 reef points just like our old mainsail. We actually prefer that method better than having a stay sail because it's one less sail to carry around and we don't have to put up a whole new sail in the middle of bad weather. It's not something we plan on using very often, but when it's blowing above 35, 40 knots, it's going to be really nice to be able to have a 3rd reef in and be able to still balance the boat well, even though it's even in heavy weather. We'll make a separate video about our reefing system and how all the control lines are run, and we'll link it somewhere up here or in the description below. And since we use our sails a lot and they're our primary means of propulsion, we kept our old sails as backup, but we can't wait to test out the new ones. They're super crispy and we're really satisfied with how they're built. but we have a little bit of painting to do before we can take Uma out for a test sail. So we'll see you guys next week. Cheers.